Very good morning to you on this 9th day of August 2021. Getting into the second hour of Kenya's biggest conversation, the Situation Room. CT, today's proverb.
If two wise men always agree, then there is no need for one.
If two wise men always agree, then there's no need for one. Okay.
Makes a lot of sense.
It does.
It does.
I mean, if you were to take that argument as logical conclusion, every time you are in a gathering and someone begins a statement is Kenyanese. Mine is to say a few words and to agree with what everybody has said. You would expect at that point they sit down, isn't it?
Yes. Right.
God.
They continue.
Mengi yamesemwa na sina mengi ya kuongeza.
Together.
Lakini jambo moja tu.
And 1 hour down the line, we're still here.
Our guest this hour is Mulle Musau. He's the National Coordinator of the Election Observation Group, ELOg. He's been here before. Welcome again, Mulle.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you, the team. At least I never got to meet him in the last time.
Yes.
It's an honor.
Thank you, sir. No, the honor is ours. The honor is mine. Yes, thank you.
Now you get to meet the
The full squad.
Yes.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So, Mulle, I was just telling these guys, reminding them, pointing it out to them, that the next 9th of August will be on a Tuesday. It'll be a public holiday. And at 6 a.m., polling centers, stations should be open and balloting should start. People on the queue voting in the next general election. CT says, looking at the recent developments in terms of pronouncements by people in various quarters, he's looking at it and saying, yes, but there's also a possibility that we may not have that election. What is the headline in the Star, CT?
Fresh plot to delay 2022 grand election. Now, I didn't inform them. We haven't had this discussion with them.
It was not you.
No, it wasn't me. I'm not the culprit behind this. But this has been my thinking. Yes.
What informs this, Mulle? When you from an election observation group, of course, you observe even the conversations that take place before the election.
And that's an informed perspective.
Yes.
I would put it in 2 words: political shenanigans.
Wow.
Because we are very clear in terms of when the next election is expected to be. As you have said, it's going to be on the 9th of August 2022. Any other variation from that date is basically a move by the political elite at their own convenience. I mean, something that is going to be organized on the basis of their own convenience. But it's going to be a very, I think it will be a very long shot, if you ask me, in terms of whether you're going to make the changes. Our laws envisage only a situation of emergency, which would call for the need to vary an election date. The kind of elections we've had in this country and the kind of engagements that you have over the last 3 or so elections are so protracted that any change, again, would nearly call for a serious soul searching by whoever attempts that. And of course, we know that the incumbents, we know that there are actors who may be strong enough to
Influence.
to wish. It is actually the wish of any incumbent to extend their time in office. Power is sweet, as you know, so nobody wants to leave it. But it's also the wish of the people who want to come in, that they want to have it at the earliest possible time. And therefore, because of that, striking that balance, that capitalist, it's called what? The invisible hand of supply and demand. Then there must be an equilibrium. That equilibrium is provided for in our law, that after 5 years you've served your time, then allow for people to be able to sit down, conduct an election, and elect their own leadership. So I do hear the political grapevine in terms of, yes, or COVID or there will be excuses that we cannot be able to have this election in good time. We know there was an advisory which was given by the other day, which was given by the African Court in terms of governments or citizens can actually think through it. Should this COVID become such a problem, you could try to reason out, but the reasoning out still has to be within our laws,
Within the law of the nation.
within our, our own.
Our laws allow for an emergency.
They do.
Mulle, emergency tunaweza create.
We actually
Emergency too.
We're actually creating one as we speak.
Emergency can
with
happen today.
COVID, but even before we go to the emergencies, there are people who are actually quoting our constitution when they put forward the argument. This particular article quotes former KANU nominated Senator Paul Njoroge. Paul Njoroge quotes two statutes. Article 124 of the Constitution, he argues that the 5-year presidential term begins the day he was sworn in. That's his argument.
Yes.
And he's saying if you have to follow that argument, then the 5th year will end next year in August, not this year. That's his argument.
Those arguments, by the way, so that is one argument by Senator Njoroge
Yes.
that says next year is when the 5th year ends.
Yes.
There's also another argument by a journalist who actually works for that media house that you're quoting, The Star, Oliver Mathenge, who's even been going out on Twitter saying that 5th year ends today. Not next year.
Yeah, but I think
Counting is a big issue in this country.
Yeah, of
Numeracy.
we have to have a semblance of understanding of what it means, because in any case, we have from a logic point of view, sometimes we make it too difficult that we have to go too technical. Oh, can we count this to the other? We know if we work by from a de facto state, in terms of this is how the season has been. It's going to be on the 5th year. The 5th year is this year. Now the question of whether it ends today and therefore
today.
the 6th year begins, or it ends on the 8th, because there's argument on the 8th of August next year. That's when the 5th year ends, and then the 6th year starts. So having it on the 9th is on the 6th year. I think they are neither here nor there, and I think there's going to be my take is that there's going to be an advisory by the Supreme Court in terms of that date, and it will be confirmed in due course. So I would not worry so much about the different dates. I'll be more worried about what you've just called creating an emergency, because that one would is something that we are capable of doing anyway.
Sure.
But although the law is also a little bit, there's some level of clarity that when you're talking about emergency, we are nearly talking about a state of war.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, you nearly have to look for something nearly equal to a state of war, and COVID could be.
Or
by
disease
the
where
way.
people are dropping
Thank
off the
you.
face of the
Yeah,
earth.
COVID
You
could be,
forgot it.
Yes.
depending, of course, on the levels that we are talking about. But there are levels also we cannot accept to go to an election with. I mean, there's a situation in the country where when everybody is dying left, right, and center, who wants to go to
What
an
are you gonna
election?
do?
Yeah, so there are things which could give
Bwana Mulle,
such a circumstance.
The circumstances you refer to are what I was insinuating. I personally think, and I begged my colleagues here to allow me a little conspiracy theorizing, when every day, with the exception of what I'm reading, the Olympics, it's a beautiful break, okay? Beautiful break. Rallies literally every week, all over the country. Either people have gone to Naivasha in supposedly smaller groups, or they have met at the DP's residence, and there are 100 of them, and that social distancing is the greatest rumor you can come across.
It's a rumor.
Then you go to the coast. The president is there. The handshake partner, the Honorable Raila Odinga, is there. Before you know it, there's another. It goes on. This is what I'm saying. The emergency is being created because
It's just not coming fast enough.
it will come. It will come because all these rallies, these are grounds where we are growing the virus and we are growing mutations.
Are you
It's just-
are you almost saying that these rallies then are intentional breeding grounds so that said emergency
Can
can be
then.
created?
I am saying that they may not have started as that, but in my mind they are. Because I would have assumed that people who, by every utterances that you hear, every utterance, they are concerned for the people. in one hustler notion or village notion or whatever notion they have, they are concerned. And yet, everything that they do when passing on their messages contradicts, it negates everything that they are talking about.
I think there is a scenario there which within the election space we have been calling a permanent campaign practice in this country. And it is not happening just in this electoral cycle. It has been happening even in the previous ones, especially where there are those. We have had three close elections. And it is nearly implores on the person who wants to contest the next election to start the next day after the election. Yes. Because you need to have a head start and momentum. So it has been happening. I think what the city is describing here is much more of an accident. Philosophically, when you call an accident that we've been having this, but through this accident of this happening, then we may do the spread without that being there, because nobody wants to die. I mean, I don't think the Right Honorable Prime Minister Raila Odinga wants to die in this process, because he may be. I mean, this COVID is not choosing anybody anyway. So you don't want Kalonzo and all the other. Nobody wants to go out there and die in the course of this matter. But because of the need to be on the ground, the need to make sure that you make your head starts and you get your momentum going. And that's one of the reasons why I think, in my view, there was a need for the referendum, because the referendum also is part of this momentum building. And once you have a referendum, then the groundswell and whatever support you get from that easily carries you over through the election. So now that we are also still in a state where we don't know whether this is going to happen or not, then it makes it very difficult for them to stay away from the platforms. They want to be there. They must remain visible. Otherwise, then the stakes become very evened out, and nobody wants that.
But legally, even in the case of an emergency such as this one, so let's say war or disease, like what we're having now, a pandemic, what would be the steps for actually legally postponing the election? What needs to happen?
It has to go to Parliament.
Who takes it to Parliament?
It is taken, such a situation, the Ministry of Interior or the Ministry of Defense, if it's talking about a war, they would have to be able to bring it to Parliament, to present through the government. The government brings it to Parliament. It is cast by the two houses, and there must be an overwhelming majority to be able to make a decision. Both houses must approve that this is a state of emergency situation, and therefore be able to approve the same.
But overwhelming majority, we're talking about two-thirds. Is it specific?
Yes. Two-thirds. Yes, two-thirds.
Of each house?
Yes. Because that's a clear, that's one of the most difficult things to be able to rush through Parliament.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Looking at all of this, and maybe even deep, what I would be worried about is the rationale behind wanting to postpone an election. Because clearly there would be a motive in all of this. It's not just postponing so we can sit around for another 6 months and do something else. There would be a rationale behind this. And I think that would be what would be the issue for me. Because now, are we seeing that particular administration wants to hold on to power a little bit longer? Particular administration wants to then see that they're able to rally the troops in terms of a new political dispensation and needs more time to be able to do that. What would be the reason that could even be understood by anybody who was considering it as to why this would want to happen in the first place?
And that's what I'm saying. Unless it is a situation of emergency, and the reason why there's also a very high threshold for that is because it must be something which is understandable by everybody. So if Parliament was to approve a state of emergency situation, it means that it is something which is very apparent everywhere. So that is the only acceptable situation. Of course, the innuendos and the schemings behind the scene is a question of somebody maybe wants to use this as an excuse to stay in power. The incumbents always desire that. But then again, there's always going to be the push of the other side, which wants to come into power, that you cannot be able to extend this beyond reasonable time. And that's the reason why, with that threshold, knowing that we have an opposition. It is expected, I would expect that Raila and his troops, they would not want a stay of the situation beyond 9th of August. They would want it as soon as possible. Because a day in a politician's life is long enough for things to really take another dynamic turn. Raila may be a leading candidate today. Give it 2 weeks, somebody else takes over. So nobody wants those variations, those variables to be at play. So I would expect that the only reason would be a genuine reason why we have to postpone an election.
What
and
if,
I think we've explained
another
that.
conspiracy point, what if there's no parliament?
Well, that's another. Well, that constitutes an emergency by itself, because remember we have an advisory from Maraga, the Supreme Court, that Parliament needed to be disbanded because it was unconstitutional.
And that hasn't expired, has it?
No.
It has no expiry.
It has no expiry date.
It has no expiry. It's an advice, so the president can consider at any time. By the way, come to think of it.
I had been advised.
So, and those are the same. In fact, I remember we had a conversation around the time that Maraga gave that advisory and the silence from State House, and said these are the cards that are usually kept somewhere in a drawer. Say, I got my advice.
That one is kept in a safe.
Yeah, they are kept somewhere. I say, well, we're not speaking about it now, but should it become necessary? Then these are something you can be able to draw. But then it also look very imprudent of the president, in my view, to disband Parliament at the end of the term. You know, it doesn't make what sense. Yes, you've been given an advice that this thing is not properly constituted, but you have an opportunity to right that wrong within a month's time or 2 months' time or 3 months' time. Why do it? There would be the wrong impressions.
Consider, we are reasoning rationally, assuming that politicians reason the same way. Political thinking doesn't lend itself to this sort of rationale.
That's true.
That is a tool that is not kept in a drawer or safe. It is used perennially. Because if the president, if there's something, a gift that Maraga gave the president, in my view, it was that advisory. It is the most beautiful gift any president can receive. Not you deciding, the Supreme Court telling you, here is the power to get rid of these fellows anytime you want. So, to me, it's a continuous bargaining chip. And it is better than anything else the president could have had. Because you know why? The Supreme Court gave it to him. It is not his. But he has the power to use it. So whenever you talk about something going to Parliament, my mind goes and say, the president only needs to express a wish, no matter how remotely, and the message will be sent because they know what he can do.
But you know, the other aspect of it is that disband Parliament now, and you're going to be forced to nearly have an election.
Yes.
Within 60 days or so, because now you're talking about a nationwide by-election. So that nearly, and that gesture is tantamount to opening up ourselves to a general election. Now the question is, now the president has to weigh. What are the implications of this in terms of whether I'm benefiting or I'm not benefiting?
From a constitutional, from a legal perspective,
Yes.
if we didn't have Parliament, does it mean we have to go into an election, legally speaking?
Well, you have to have a representation. You see, our democracy is a representative democracy. Unless you want to turn into a dictatorship, we express ourselves through our legislators. So if you don't have Parliament, then the people are not being listened to. So that means, that basically says you're in a dictatorship. Somebody is controlling everything.
It's unconstitutional to have Parliament.
Yes, you need to have Parliament. And we know that the laws say that if you don't have a parliamentarian, within 60 days, Iabc is supposed to be giving out a writ which says we have vacancies. So we should be able to conduct 290 by-elections across the country. And somebody ran to court and say, why are we having 290 by-elections across the country when we are just about to have a general election? Why don't we have a general election?
And the matter will be in court, won't it?
Of course.
And can we control the length of time it will be in court?
Well, now that's subject not to the legal.
I think you get where I'm going with my thinking.
And then in the meantime, the power remains.
And in the meantime, you're not earning a salary. And in the meantime, everything about you that relates to your well-being as an MP comes to an end. What am I saying? I'm merely emphasizing that advisory is a powerful tool. That's all I'm saying.
So it can
No,
arm
no,
twists.
you're very clear, City.
Getting the 2/3 vote, you
Yeah.
can use this particular advisory, just wagging it and saying, we need to extend the life of this parliament. And we have an emergency called COVID. We need 2/3 majority in the National Assembly to pass this thing.
Let me tell you something.
Please.
See, right now, what stops? You've had the debate between within the Jubilee party, for instance, where
Which Jubilee?
okay, that's what I meant. I mean, actually, because you're coming to that question. So, from where I speak, I'm speaking about Jubilee because there's a party called Jubilee. From where they speak, they could be talking about two different factions. But that problem, why are we not having an impeached deputy president? Why are we not having those members of parliament? And remember the process in which they can be dismembered from those political parties. Then we have to go to. Why is that not happening? There's usually a kind of detente, a kind of peace accord between people because they know the implications. There's always a political rider to this. The president, as he works these cards, and he has something in the safe, as it is saying, he knows also there's a political implication of even producing or producing those cards in the table at some point. And part of it is something that we were reminded in 2007, that the country can go into anarchy, and there's nobody, no incumbent president who wants that situation, because the problem with that is you are no longer safe.
Even
Monopoly,
you
lose control.
even you as a president. So I think because of the fact that the kind of protracted engagements in the political space are such that there is nearly a truce that let's just make sure that things are going on normally so that this other card, the ugly one,
does not have to feature.
does not have to feature. So I think that truth, in a way, can keep the thing going in terms of making sure that normal services are the ones we are having.
You're very kind, and I believe the truth makes sense. But I would argue it's self-interest that actually it comes into the truth, but it's self-interest because if you're talking about habit acquired over time and which has featured as the norm among our legislators, is this keen sense of self-interest. Very, very keen sense. And if you're talking about an emergency, let me tell you why my thinking went this way. The first time I ever heard of the term curfew was when you're in a state of emergency. Okay? Now, we've had curfew. So it means we were in a state of medical, health, clinical emergency. That's why I was furthering that argument and saying, forget many other reasons that you may require. COVID may provide you with that perfect excuse that you're looking for.
But also you need some proper support on the ground. Because today, if you came out and said, let's delay this election, even within Parliament, there are people who are willing to go into an election, not for many other reasons, but because they think that with their alignment right now, they're best positioned to retain their seat. With their alignment right now, they feel that this is the best time. If every new day is an opportunity for somebody else to emerge, and everybody goes into an election feeling, I'm prepared. I'm riding a good wave, whether you're riding a wave of Tanga, Kieleweke, or handshake, you're riding a good wave where you can still come back. I think you need a lot of support on the ground as the leadership of the country to agree to the calls for an extension.
And technically too, you see, if you're going to use COVID, you must provide data, you must provide information. And in a country like Kenya, there's no monopoly of information. You cannot be able to say that the government, which is going to be giving us statistics, is going to escalate the situation to an extent that we think things cannot work. As of today, it has opened up public transport for matatu wajaze watu. So already there is a de-escalation of sorts. So you have to really ride it up. And if you're going to ramp it up with numbers, it must be numbers that Okia Mtata is not going to find a problem with. It's going to, and any other person who may decide to follow up through.
There must be obvious numbers.
There must be very clear numbers.
Okay. So we're having a conversation about next year's general election, the preparation for it. Are we ready for that election? We've started with the conspiracy theories. I mean, we've been seeing them. This not just conspiracy theories, actually, but moves and statements by people arguing that we should be postponing. Somebody has gone to court, a former senator has gone to court and says, the next general election should statistically be on the 9th of August 2023 and not 22. And Mulle Musau is here with us this morning. In the Situation Room this morning is Eric Latif, Nduoko, C.T. Muga, and Mulle Musau, National Coordinator, Election Observation Group, ELOg, counting down 365 days to the next general election, 9th of August 2022. As we look at that countdown, Mulle,
Yes.
what are the critical dates that we should be looking out for?
The big date itself, 9th of August. So everybody now works with that. Of course, pending any determinations by the court otherwise. So we're working with the 9th of August as a big day. There are a number of key dates that are important, starting with the date where fundraising ends. That is on the 9th of December, usually 8 months before the election. So
what does that mean?
This issue about looking for money for the elections, whether it was Harambes or whatever it is, you don't have it after that, because any attempt to look for money after that must be scrutinized further. Because we're talking about an election.
How do you monitor the process?
There is a problem with that, a big problem, because remember, one of the issues which just happened last week was that the campaign financing bill was presented to Parliament on Thursday.
Last week.
It expired on the 9th. That was, is it today? No, on the 8th, that was yesterday.
What do you mean expired?
Expired is this, that for you to have regulations on how to regulate campaign finance,
yes.
It must be in place 1 year to an election. So it was presented on Thursday last week, and then Friday, Parliament does not sit. Does sit over the weekend. It does sit on Tuesday, tomorrow. So it's technically overtaken.
Why present it so late?
Now, this is a bill, if you remember, which was presented to Parliament in 2016, and for the same reason, it was suspended.
Yep.
Now, if it was presented to Parliament in 2016, it means that yes, it expires, but it is in Parliament. Okay, so you cannot say there's no excuse for Parliament to say, "Oh, you know what? We don't have the bill. It is with you." It is expired, yes, in terms of that election, but it is resident. In any case, Iabc made some amendments to the same bill, and they presented to Parliament in last year. So now you can't say what is the excuse of the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee or any other committee which is in charge of such matters. So that's why, as City says, it become the framework now for dealing with campaign finance becomes very difficult. But nevertheless, the date is 9th. Of December. How we'll sort it out is a question of discussion.
Okay.
We have 6 months to the election. We expect all public servants who would want to run in the election to resign. That should be on the 9th of by the 9th of February. And then on the 14th of March, we have a gazette notice on the election. So the confirmation from Iabc that the election is going to be happening on the 9th of August is going to be confirmed on 14th of March. The big dates, again, after that, we have political party primaries, which really the election before the election. They are expected to conduct their primaries at the very least 90 days to an election. So based on the timelines which have been given, because based on the regulatory agency, ABC and the ORPP, they have set out April 16th to 22nd as the date for party primaries. But there's a discussion point there, because the next date, about on the 9th of May, we expect that independent candidates have resigned from political parties. Why that is a discussion is that it's a window which was given, which was created. It's part of the debates that people have been having in terms of our elections, that an initial law which created the need for anybody who wants to become an independent candidate to have resigned at least 3 months before was waived, and now we have a situation where political parties can do their nominations,
And
and
then
then the losers have about 2 weeks in which they now can run to IBC and register themselves as independent candidates by 9th of May.
Wasn't the initial conversation saying that independent candidates should not have participated in party primaries? I mean, wasn't that the thing? So that we avoid party hopping. All right. So one, we avoid party hopping. And also, second, we make sure that independent candidates are people who are truly independent. They are not aligned to any political party.
And that was the idea behind having the 3 months caveat. Because you see, when you say 3 months, that means if the party primaries are going to be held on the 16th to 22nd, then they would not be participating in them because they're not members of that political party.
Yeah.
Right.
And when you remove that issue, then it opens, it's silent, it doesn't talk about it, but it says, well they have rigged me out and I have no other place to go. And I have every right to participate in the next elections irrespective. So you have a window of about 2 weeks, and then you're supposed to present your papers. After that, then the next big dates become the end of May, when the official nominations are submitted to the IBC. So you're having the presidency, who is running now as we confirm, because the parties now have chosen papers. There's been a petition process. We have allowed for a petition process, dispute resolutions of these nominations. Then these papers now are presented officially to the IEBC for confirmation into the elections. So that is by 7th of June, that entire process, which includes from the presidency to the MCS, we have concluded with it. After that, we now start preparing ourselves for the elections because we will be basically having a month or so. There are other dates, though, in between. We have events. We expect the voter register to be closed within, again, 3 months of the elections, so that we can go through, so that's also by 9th of May, so that we have a verification process. About a month is given for verification. Voters can go confirm their names and details, and then we have a certified copy of the voter register after that. So after that month of June, we should be able to have in the last month, that's July, we should be having a certified voter register, the one that is now the one which is going to be used for the elections. The official voter register. The last official, the last official voter register. So it goes to, we got to use it now on the 9th of August.
All these dates, the way you've set them out, these are dates that are in law, in constitution, and in law.
Yes.
In the Elections Act as well.
Yes.
Is there any, apart from now this one of campaign financing, which has some question mark, is there any other here that has some question mark, that does not have its regulations in place, that is not, hasn't been tried and tested?
The voter registration, our laws say that voter registration is continuous. If you remember, in the run-up to the last election, we had somebody who went to court and said, well, you have your 90 days, yes, but the law also says that we have supposed to be having a continuous voter register. So when you close out on us, we are turning 18 every 18
day. After that.
Yeah, so how far is how far? How close is how close? Yes. What is the determination of these 90 days? Of course, we expect that we have to close.
As my daughter's... Wait, now I'm going to court. My daughter turns 18 on the 28th of May.
Yeah, so
this means that
they're locked out. Yeah, they're locked out.
No.
They are locked out.
And
So
can you imagine the joy that
Muthui
somebody who's turned 18,
Yes.
looking forward to actually
to
voting?
participating in this for the first time.
no, the last time IBC tried to have a closure of the voter register quite early, and somebody went to court and they had to be pushed by some, I think, a month or so, so that more people could be able to register. So the thing is that while there could be some fluidity in terms of some of those issues, but then of course we also understand the need why IBC must lock up the register, because they have to work. Those are the logistics that they have worked with. These numbers help them.
They've got to prepare.
Whether we want to have polling stations, and remember the polling stations are supposed to be gazetted. about a month to the election. We're supposed to be having all the polling stations gazetted. The determination of those polling stations comes from the number of voters.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, you have to say these are the numbers, and because we have put a cap in terms of the number of people who can vote in a polling station, then the new numbers must determine the number of polling stations that we're going to be having. So these are things which follow each other, and logistical planning is also based on the numbers. So there is an understanding. Again, it's about striking a balance within this, but there is a framework of law which has been provided.
So this is also the time by which you should change your polling center if you want to.
Yes.
Because people want to change. I want, for example, last time I voted in Machakos, this time I want to vote in Nairobi. So by this time I should.
You can do that even now. Nobody has been stopped from changing their polling station even as of now, because we have a continuous voter registration process. So if you go to your local constituency election office, you should be able to do these things even as we speak. Iabc is starting what they call the mass voter registration process this September. That will be a very good opportunity for anybody who wants to change, because now all hands will be on the question of voter registration. So anybody who wants to make changes, that's the best time to be able to do this.
I'm looking at some of these dates that you're talking about. I'm going to come back specifically to this one for which it lapsed on the 8th of August, looking at yesterday, the funds bill. What implications does it have then in terms of now fundraising? What implications does it have? And then now if you can graduate that to other conversations whereby a date comes and passes and certain things have not been done. Seems as though from what you've said that all of these issues can be sorted out, in court. Court gives an order. This can be sorted out if you pass a certain date for certain things, right? Now, this particular one, what implications does it have on the process?
The major implication of not having a regulation framework is that then we cannot be able to superintend over the money which is going to be brought in the election. The campaign financing bill and act outlaws certain sources of funds. For instance, you cannot get money from terrorists to come and run elections in Kenya or to participate. You cannot be supported by a foreign country to run an election. For instance, if somebody is getting money from another country, the chances are then the other country is trying to control us. So there are all these questions about where the money comes from.
Yep.
For IEBC to be able to then regulate or to be able to track these sources, they need to have a kind of a framework. And then they also have to be ceilings. Elections is also about fairness. And you've heard about people who are coming with money from questionable sources, and then the loot is shared out there. It creates a very unfavorable environment, especially for new candidates and aspirants, women, young people. They cannot be able to participate effectively in election because somebody, a sonko somewhere, has everything. So when you miss out on the regulation, the legal framework for this, then you have no basis. Although we still argue that the Constitution under Article 88 still gives IABC the power to regulate. Now the problem is they'll argue we have no framework.
Yeah, no
we have tried to push
framework.
something in Parliament, but they're not. So that's the biggest implication.
Can someone go to court after an election and say this election was not credible? Because I feel that people with more money than I, that had questionable means, came and outplayed me. Can someone go to court and argue that this election was not credible?
Nobody stops anybody from arguing that an election was unfair in whatever respect, because that should be one of the principles of an election. Fairness and equalness in terms of the vote. It's a major issue in an election. Last time we were discussing about the credibility of elections, that's a critical issue around fairness. How was it a level playing ground? If somebody had more money, and I can argue, and that's where the problem now comes in, is that now the court will also want to dispense of this matter or arbitrate over this matter based on some legal definitions.
Right.
Now, if you don't have them,
there's no definition of how much is too much.
Yeah, so
it becomes a problem.
So it seems as though it would appear then all right, if I'm going to go into the realms of conspiracy again, is that there's a deliberate effort then not to debate on this matter, because what it does is that it opens up the boundaries and anybody can basically do whatever they want. And because there was no framework initially to define where your funds came from, then you cannot come later and adjudicate over something for which there was no definition.
That's very right. And we've listened to the arguments that Parliament even had in 2016 and some of the discussions even in the run-up to this particular bill being tabled about them not having or them believing that IBC does not have the capacity to be able to manage the process of we usually have more than 25,000 aspirants in an election. Yeah. When you say there's a law which should regulate money, it means that even the last MCA must be regulated.
Should also be regulated.
But now, some of the provisions in the Campaign Finance Act were that we have disclosure was the means by which you'll be forced to account for yourself, and disclosure was going to be random. So ABC can pick on Eric and say, Eric, tell us where you got your money, and we'll investigate. And if you find there's a problem, then we disbar you or we disqualify you from the election. So that is a measure of control. So
which
you can't say
can be abused.
Yes, of course.
To get rid of certain candidates. Because if I can just come out of this, well, if all of us are vying for one seat, and I just come and ask you, Mulle, just prove to me, and I know clearly all of us have unquestionable means, I ask you, prove or tell me where you got your finances. I find something wrong, I disqualify you. I leave the rest to campaign.
Yeah, but you see, remember, under that disclosure framework, everybody, those 25,000 or 30,000 aspirants are supposed to submit their own, disclose their own sources. So the problem is that IBC will not go to all those accounts, but it may go now. That's why you're talking about it could be manipulated. That they'll go to an account and say, Latif, please explain to us. You gave us this, prove it. And if you have a problem, we find a problem with it, then we'll disqualify you. Of course, in this country, these things can be misused, but at least it allows you a starting point.
Okay.
Now the debate can be, how do we fasten? How do we make it tighter moving forward?
I've got two questions from social media on the issue of voter register. Number one is, currently, is there a way for someone to check if they are registered or not? One, of course, you'll say going to the IEBC office.
Yes.
Is there any other, like electronic? Like, can I send a message via USSD and confirm my status? The second one was, there's a conversation that happened with IEBC recently where they were talking about needing to procure better servers and new systems to manage their data register and the electoral process. Now, does that mean that they migrate? Have they said that they can migrate the data that they have currently onto a new system should they procure it, or would they be required to re-register everybody afresh?
Well, on the first question in terms of the voter registration, yes, you can be able to check. You can be able to walk into those stations. I would have to confirm, because IBC the last time had, you could also be able to confirm it through an SMS and confirm your registration. I would have to confirm whether that is still active as of now. What I know is that in the run-up to the election, such opportunities do arise. They create the opportunity for you to be able to check. Yeah. But it has to be confirmed whether that is still active up to now. But they usually provide such avenues for confirmation. On the technology, yes, they are required to migrate all. If you're going to buy new devices, then you are required to migrate all the information. Of course, in a very efficient way, making sure you don't lose any data, because that can become a subject of litigation if you lose out on anything. Remember, we only know that we have their register.
Yeah.
So how you move it from a box file into your laptop, into the Keys, into whatever other copy disks and other things, that's your problem, so long as you do not lose my information. So I think it is the work of the ICT department in IABC to be able to come up with solutions which ensure that data is not lost.
The other issue is on the issue of the polling centers, polling stations. Which one is which? Polling center, polling station?
Today we don't have anything called polling centers. They are just all polling stations.
Okay.
Yes.
And this is the stream?
Yeah. Every class is a polling station. by itself. Usually you have about 8 classes, maybe in Olympic primary school.
Yes.
Each of them is usually a station.
Is a station
by itself. Yes.
Now, is Iabc mandated to increase or reduce the number of polling stations?
Yes, on the basis of the number of voters. So we are expecting, for instance, that we are going to have more voters this time. We were 19.6 million the last time. As we move to the next election, I've seen the targets that IBC is having is around 25 million voters. So again, you'll have to divide by the number of voters per polling station, which is usually 500. So you get the number of polling stations on the basis of that. So it'll vary on the basis of it. The idea is to be as inclusive and as to ensure that as many people participate. You enfranchise as many people as possible. So the polling station must be as close as possible to the populace. So
Mulle,
you increase the numbers, you increase the polling stations.
With regards to this electioneering financing, it's still in my mind. Have we had a case of somebody who has been either should we say disqualified, or there may be court cases, and has that limitation to financing, I'm using as gentle a term as I can, has it ever been put into operation? Have we seen it work?
The Campaign Financing Act came into place in 2013.
Yes.
Conveniently after the election.
I like that you said convenient.
Yeah, it was very convenient. After the election. And then we have had it suspended in 2017. We have had it now, looks like it's going to be suspended for 2022. So in that respect, that law has not been put into place, into practice. However, there is we still have the other laws which are attend to corruption. You see, we have also now general laws which attend to the question of corruption, because any sources of money which are from corrupt sources. You've had this debate, for instance, about the deputy president and his trip to Uganda, and the implication of if money was being given towards his campaign or such. So the action can be taken on the basis of this is corruption, this is terrorism, or this is this. So on the basis of that, but that would have to nearly to be taken by other quarters, not so much. Maybe it's called what? The Director of Public Prosecutions Office, DPP, and not so much of IABC, unless an issue is brought to IABC that somebody comes and says we have every reason to believe that the sources of this particular candidate are criminal, and then an investigation can be sounded off.
You know, I raised this question. There has been this issue of qualifications. What would-be, wannabe legislators need to have in terms of formal education qualifications. In my mind, it's fairly clear. You went to this school or you didn't go to this school.
Right.
You acquired this or you didn't acquire it. And we even have a Kenya National Qualification Authority that does these things. Yet, this thing, which in my mind is simple, keeps rearing its head. Somebody went and yet they didn't go. Somebody qualified yet they didn't qualify. And it ought to be clear. Why I'm saying this is, even if, let us say, the Finance Act include this matter regarding electioneering financing, even if it became law, I am saying it would affect nothing. The way our political situation is and the way our electioneering processes tend to be conducted. It would be there. But
it depends on how the law is enacted. For instance, you see on that matter of Chapter 6 and going to get your certificates from, let's say, EACC, CID, who taking them to IABC. What does the law tell those institutions? In the case of EACC, is have you been convicted? Is there? Those are the things that they check. Not are we investigating you?
Whether there were charges, whether they
whether that you have actually been convicted and you have not exhausted all avenues
of appeal.
That's our problem, is how we even structure the law.
But there's some point to what he's saying, which is very important. Kofi Annan, in a report that they did in 2012 called Deepening Democracy, a strategy for improving the integrity of elections worldwide, among the 5 factors which he talked about, let me just read all of them. One was the implementation of the rule of law and electoral justice. If you want to have credible elections, that's a standard. professional and independent election management body. That's another one. The removal of barriers to universal and equal participation, especially for the special interest groups. But the last two, established institutions and norms of electoral democracy. And the last one, regulation of political finance. Now, those two, the issue of norms, so because you're talking about ESCC, and the other, we call them, all of them EMBs, because the EMB is not just Iabc. The election management body includes even ESC if it has to make decisions around elections.
Okay.
The Office of the Registrar of Political Parties, because it is making decisions around elections. So those norms, do those institutions understand when they are coming up with whatever decisions they are coming up? Are they aiding our electoral practice and democracy? Are they supporting it? So that they not just read the letter
And apply it strictly.
and apply the letter in black and white, but also the spirit of it, that here we are trying to ensure that the right candidates go through. Because why would the Commission of Higher Education and all those entities, who are, you are seated there, why would we still be having people who are without degrees?
That's true.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.